Ancient, okay. Ancient Carthage was located in what is now Tunisia. It began as a colony of the Phoenician city-state of Tyre in what is now Lebanon around 814 BCE. Carthage became a fully independent city-state when Phoenicia was conquered by the Assyrians about 150 years later. The language they spoke is known as Punic, a dialect of Phoenician, but influenced by a language spoken by the Berbers, who populated North Africa, and still to a large extent do. Punic is said to have lasted as a living language among some North African peasants until the 6th century of the Common Era. Emerging as a great maritime trading and military power, Carthage proceeded to build its empire in the central and western Mediterranean, basically along the coasts. So by 300 BC, it had colonies and vassal states in Northwest Africa, southern Iberia, and the islands of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, and the Balearic Archipelago. So we see all those islands here and places. At its height, Carthage was considered the largest city in the world. Carthage had a republican form of government that was not dissimilar to the Roman Republic. It included a form of representative democracy, but also with strong elements of oligarchy, not unlike the patrician class that dominated Rome. The great general Hannibal came from such an oligarchic family, the Barcas. Carthage had a legislature, just as Rome had its Senate. Rome, having consolidated its control over the over the Italian peninsula, you see in red, with its victory over the Greek city-states in the Punic Wars, was now looking to expand into the Mediterranean and beyond. Hence, these two ambitious empires were simply bound to clash. Let's look at slide number 2, which is Polybius. Polybius, the main source we have for the history of the Punic Wars is Polybius, a Greek sent to Rome as a hostage in 167 BCE. His writing is considered neutral and unbiased. Rome and Carthage actually had cordial relations for almost 2.5 centuries. They first signed a treaty, mainly concerned with trade, in 509 BCE. For most of this time, Carthage was at war with the Greeks for control of Sicily. They fought at least 4 distinct wars. Carthage battled with the powerful Greek city-state of Syracuse, and in the final conflict, Carthage struggled with armies and navies led by Pyrrhus, the same Pyrrhus famous for battling Rome. Pyrrhus came close to defeating Carthage, but finally had to withdraw, leaving most of the island of Sicily under Carthaginian control. Rome's strength was in the army, but not its navy. So this conflict began with Carthage being a great naval power, having the advantage. But the Romans were quick learners in developing a powerful navy. The land army of Carthage was composed heavily of foreign mercenaries and auxiliaries, particularly Iberians, Balearics, Gauls, Sicilians, Italians, Greeks, Numidians, and Libyans. The significance of this fact will become apparent at the end of my talk. The first war extended from 264 BCE to 241, about 23 years. And the total of the 3 Punic Wars, although not fought continuously, lasted until 146. So that's 118 years. So our never-ending wars, one of which has just ended, pales in comparison with these wars. As you'll see, the war seesawed between the two sides until the very end, with the momentum often shifting from Rome to Carthage and vice versa.
Are you showing us the map?
Well, we could go back to the map. But most of the land battles were fought in Sicily. Also, a lot of the sea battles, maybe most of them, around the waters of Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Syracuse here. So the first, it broke out in Sicily. The Greek city-state of Messina. Do we have that here? No. Well, yes, we do.
Yes, of
Yes,
course.
we do. Okay. The Greek city-state of Messina was at war with Syracuse, and it appealed to help from Carthage. But then, for some reason, I'm not clear, switched to getting help from Rome and expelled the Carthaginian garrison. This enraged Carthage and ignited the war. Carthage then became allied with Syracuse, which sounds pretty stupid, but a lot of these conflicts have these stupid elements in them. This prompted the Roman consul at Messina to ask for a peace deal, which the Carthaginian commander refused. So another stupid move. The Battle of Aggregatum is named for a Sicilian city where the Romans besieged a small Carthaginian army in 262 BCE. I guess that's not on the map. The Romans underestimated the strength of the Carthaginians, however, and wound up suffering losses in a surprise attack from the city. But the Romans continued the siege and had to stand up to a relief army from Carthage. The relief army harassed the Romans until the two sides finally met in a pitched battle, which Rome won. They then entered the starving city, sacked it, and enslaved 25,000 surviving inhabitants. This was not an unusual practice for the time, but it did turn many Sicilian towns against Rome.
Ralph, we have one question. We have Larry raised hand.
Sure.
Larry, go ahead.
It's a minor point, but I was wondering if Syracuse was still a major sea power as it was at the end of the Peloponnesian War. And if so, an alliance by Rome would make a lot more sense. Rome needed help in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think we missed that part because what happened after the Messania.
Greg, 1 second. I'm going to get into it. Whatever he's missed, I will get into it in a second part.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Then let's not talk about Syracuse then.
I really can't say. I think you make a good point, but
Syracuse, just to give you a little synopsis, was under a King Hera.
Mhm.
And what happens is basically just very in summary, they first aligned themselves with Carthage, and then what happened is they saw this huge amount of soldiers coming in, 40,000 infantry. In fact, Romans didn't have boats; they used fishing boats to get in on the side of the Sicily. And when they saw them marching and winning all these battles in Messina, Hero switched, and that was a pinnacle point of how Roman got a foothold in Sicily.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Can I add something else? I think it switched. Cyrus switched later because the Romans actually went and besieged Syracuse, and eventually Hera made an agreement with them because he knew that it's not going to end well, and as a result, they paid. There were payments that Syracuse started to make to Rome of 100 talents of silver. And in addition to this, what was the most important thing is the Syracuse was providing, supporting the supplying the army, Roman army, and that was the most valuable thing because the supply chain, they didn't have very good supply chain from Italy. And now when they had this reliable source of supply from Syracuse, because it was part of the this agreement, the Roman army had an opportunity to have that battle in Aggregatum, which is the just between Lilybaeum and Sicily, somewhere in between there. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good. So the Romans were inspired by this victory to want to take the entire island.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Paul had another addition. Paul, go ahead. Sorry, and then we'll continue after that. Go
ahead,
Paul.
Oops, you're muted.
You're muted, Paul.
Paul, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I was saying that at the very beginning of the war, there was the incident involving the Mamertines. So, Ralph, if you're going to talk about that, I will
talk about it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your additions, guys. But whatever he has his 30 minutes or 40 minutes presentation, let's get through it, and then I'll talk about what he's missed. Okay. So,
I guess there are a lot of details that go into this 23-year conflict, and I obviously I haven't
Ralph,
I haven't captured all of them.
To their point, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do look at a lot of these details as we go. That's why Paul and Greg wanted to add to it, and I didn't know our structure, so I wanted to give them the structure of our.
No, that's fine. I'm trying at least to hit the big points, the essential kind of frame of this thing. The Romans were inspired by the victory to want to take the entire island. Their appetites were whetted, and for this they knew they had to build a powerful navy, which they built with astonishing speed. Training the crews on dry land. They had like special benches that they would set up on the sand, and the rowers would, well, actually you do the one oar. You should probably do the number 3 slide, which is the Roman warships, the early Roman warships. Now, Corvus?
I think Larry wanted to say something.
That's it. Yeah.
Really, I can wait. It's just a lot of what we're going to discuss concerns Roman technological development at sea.
Yes, well, that's critically important. So you have here the quinqueremes and the triremes, which are, basically they were building standard warships of the time that the Greeks and Phoenicians both used. The quinqueremes would have 5 men to an oar. The triremes, you would think would have 3 to an oar, but actually it was 1 person to an oar. The thing is, both kinds of ships had 3 rows of rowers. You know, these ships also had sails, but what made them really fast was that, they could always move no matter what the wind is having all these rowers. On both sides of the ship. And there was this early innovation of the corvus, but I'll talk to that about that in a little while. You see, the first thing that happened was the first naval battle that the Romans fought with the Carthaginians. They lost. They lost 17 ships, and that convinced the Romans that they needed a little edge, that really they understood, they didn't have this experience of seamanship that the Carthaginians had. So they built this piece of technology called the corvus, and you see it. You see it on this ship here. You see it at the bow here, and you also see it in just as a single structure. It was a kind of a movable bridge. Yeah, this is another shot of it. It was a movable bridge or a platform that you could they could maneuver onto an enemy ship, and their fighting men would go across this platform and engage the enemy as infantry. And the Romans could have as many as 120 infantry board a ship, and it that was a pretty effective tactic. Next, we could look at slides 5 and 6. Okay, both 5 and 6 are going to show you the corvus in action. I think 6 also has the corvus in action. Okay. At the Battle of Mylae, 260 BCE, the corvus proved very successful, with the Romans sinking 50 Carthaginian ships out of their fleet of 130, to the loss of only 11 Roman ships out of their fleet, estimated at somewhere between 90 and 145 ships. The Roman commander then returned to Sicily and relieved the city of Segesta that was under siege. In 258 BCE, the Romans won another victory at sea at Salsus, after which Carthaginian sailors arrested their commander, Gisco, and crucified him. The Carthaginians had a habit of treating their defeated commanders with extreme, terminating them with extreme prejudice, shall we say. These naval battles were not pretty, as illustrated by slides 7 and 8. Though actually this picture is quite dramatic. 7 and 8. Okay. 2 years later, in 256, Carthage lost another major naval battle at Economus, and then Rome invaded Carthage directly, landing an army in North Africa. Defeat seemed inevitable, but for some reason that has baffled historians, the Romans withdrew half their army and half their fleet. Nevertheless, the remaining Roman force won a victory on land and occupied the city of Aggregatum, which is now Tunis. The Carthaginians sued for peace, but the Roman conditions for surrender seemed so harsh that they chose to fight on and quickly rebuilt their army with the help of the Spartan general Xenopus, who became their commander. In 255, the following year, this army won a crushing victory over the Romans at the Battle of Aggregatum. I think we have a
Ralph,
slide of
Howard
that.
has a hand on, I think.
Pardon?
Howard has a question.
Howard?
Yeah. I was just wondering how confident are they about those ship reconstructions? I've been curious about ancient galleys, and I'm under the impression they were the fact that they could build hundreds of them sort of indicates they were probably pretty small.
Well, they weren't supposed to be small.
Yeah, think about it. If you're
Are you talking about the Romans
building
building?
pretty well everybody. I mean, the Athenians built hundreds of war galleys. Remember, these things are equipped with a ram. So if you have a big ship and I have a little ship and I whip around and ram you, you sink.
Yeah, well,
I think the triremes, yes, they were built in huge numbers. They were the standard fighting ship, but they were built to be quite light. So they were quite fragile and sinkable. They were designed to be very fast and maneuverable, but
And
the
when
lightness, and as a result, virtually no ruined triremes have been discovered. So there's virtually no real empirical evidence of exactly how they were constructed. These are all speculative reconstructions. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, when you mention light construction, anytime there was a big storm, they lost hundreds of these things.
Yeah,
They weren't
true.
seaworthy.
Yeah, that's true. It did figure, storms did figure big later on in the war.
Yeah. The problem is when you look at naval warfare, between the mid 15th century and mid 20th century, naval warfare was done by gunboats, and in a fight between gunboats, the big one wins. So the obvious thing to do as an admiral is you get on the biggest gunboat, put your flag on, it becomes your flagship. In a war between ramming ships, it's more like fighter planes. And there's really benefits to being small and being small and fast and light is an advantage.
Well, what I can tell you is that that's not what the ancient commentators say. The ancient commentators would describe battles, and smaller ships were considered as a great disadvantage. It was always more desirable to have triremes rather than small ships that were called pentaconters. Remember that really it's about maneuverability and speed comes from the number of rowers that you have.
Yeah.
And if the galleys were fragile, you could have to imagine that the smaller ships were even more fragile.
Yeah.
We have one more person raised hand, Larry. Sorry.
Just a comment that there are two sources that help us reconstruct the size of a trireme. One is the size of the sheds in which they were constructed and housed, which suggests that there might be around 40 meters long. And the other is, let's see. I'm sorry, the sheer number of rowers, and a comment by Vitruvius that each rower had 2 meters.
Yeah. Well, I looked at the picture, that ship, we had the side view, and I'm getting 250 rowers in that thing.
Yeah, and so if it's 2 meters per rower, that's one hell of a ship. It suggests Vitruvius was wrong.
Yeah, I think 150 rowers was standard, 25
Mhm.
rowers in each of 3 banks on each
Yeah.
side. So 75 on a side, 150 rowers. 250 might be the total complement, because as he said, there might be another 100 Marines or
Yeah,
soldiers fighting
right.
people and other people on the deck. So a total complement of 250,
Well,
150 rowers was, I think, the standard.
I've read as many as 300 to 400.
Well, don't forget, it might not be a warship. If you're a king of Egypt, you're a Ptolemy in Egypt, you may build a Pentacont or whatever that looks cool, and you'd never sail it into battle.
Yeah, but if you know the number of oars and you have a good idea how much space you need to row,
Mhm.
you have an estimate of the length of the ship.
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't think we're actually ignorant of the size of the ship.
Size really did matter. I mean, at the point that quinquiremes came into being, triremes kind of were obsolete. So there was a real tendency to build bigger. And these people were very practical. They wouldn't have done that if it didn't give them a military advantage.
Mhm.
Well, according to stuff I've read, some of the quinquiremes were really royal ceremonial ships.
Yeah.
The triremes were the standard fighting ships. The so yeah, some of the emperors, the Egyptian pharaohs built these huge ships, but they were too big to be maneuverable, so they were more ceremonial flagships than actual fighting ships.
Yeah, and it was looking cool and being fit for combat are two different things.
Well, of course, in those days, both Carthage and Rome, neither Carthage nor Rome had emperors.
And they didn't build big crazy ships. They built functional combat ships.
And it's very interesting that when the Romans were building their first fleet, I cut myself short, actually. They were training their crews on land while they were building the ships. And the way they would do that was they would set up these benches that mimicked, the benches they'd sit on on the ship, and they do, rigorous training in terms of the rowing, the stroking, the rhythm. The Romans were very inventive. They were very good at copying, and they were very good at adapting.
Well, I think that's right. With 25 oarsmen at 2-meter intervals and 75 oars on a side, the coordination had to be very fine. So the rowers were highly trained, highly skilled people, because otherwise you could get totally messed up very easily.
Yeah,
I think they would use a drum stroke to, do the rhythm thing.
Yeah, galley slates apparently were invented by the Spanish in the 16th century CE.
Who? Sorry?
The what?
Galley slaves were invented by the Spanish in the 16th century CE.
Yeah.
That idea came on.
And I think, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, Ralph, but I think in the beginning, because Romans didn't acquire the skill of maneuvering to the same extent, that's why they used those bridges to convert it, corvus, to convert it into the kind of land war instead on the sea. But then later on, by the end of this war, they basically learned to maneuver as much, and they dismantled those corvuses because
you're getting ahead of me. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Good. I'm sorry.
Right. So anyway, you got this Battle of Aggregatum, which is a land battle. This is a battle that didn't have to be fought if the Romans had offered better terms to Carthage for peace. But this was, so the Carthaginians were fighting with an army that was trained and led by the Spartan general Xenopus. And we know what the Spartans were like in terms of their ability to fight land battles. So this army won a crushing victory over the Romans at this battle. The decisive stroke was Greek cavalry routing Roman cavalry after a successful elephant charge. So you have, this is sort of a little bit of a depiction of that kind of moment with the elephants kind of routing horsemen. And so, okay, so in a few years later, and I'm jumping around because these were the, you know, there were, I mean, I guess if I were doing a really professional job, I would look into what would happen during the interim of these few years. But, you know, I'm trying to do the broad strokes. So going from 255 to 251, the Romans renewed their offensive in Sicily, and they captured Panormus, which is now the city of Palermo. And then they raided North Africa, but a storm at sea inflicted a catastrophe. Maybe you should go back to the original map so we have at least some notion of, you know, okay, good. So the Romans renewed, you know, so they captured Panormus, now the city of Palermo, and then they raided North Africa, but a storm at sea inflicted a catastrophe, sinking 150 Roman ships, and it says inflicting the loss of 90,000 men. I mean, I haven't done the arithmetic, so I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
So what were those numbers again?
150 ships, 90,000 men.
600 per ship.
600 a ship. That's a lot.
That is a
Yeah.
lot. That is a lot. So,
Okay.
so maybe we're talking more like 50 or 60,000.
Yeah.
And it's very possible, and Greg, here we come to your point, it's very possible that the Corvus contributed to their losses because of the weight it added to the ships.
Mhm.
And after this catastrophe, the device was never mentioned again, leading historians to believe that they probably stopped using them. The Carthaginians took advantage of these Roman losses to attack in Sicily. They marched back on Aggregatum, which they destroyed rather than attempt to hold. Still, in 252, the Romans renewed the offensive, taking a number of Sicilian towns. When one of the two Roman consuls in command at Panormus ended his term, and you know, if you recall, the Roman government, they would promote two consuls as sort of their executives, and they would leave. They would have overlapping terms. So when one of the two consuls in command at Panormus ended his term, the Carthaginians attempted to take advantage of the customary practice, which was when a consul left, he took some forces with him, you know, legions that he sponsored. So there was this customary reduction in force, and so this encouraged the Carthaginians to attack. But Metellus, the consul who remained, even though outnumbered, cleverly lured the Carthaginians into a trap. Roman light forces harassed the Carthaginians, causing them to unleash their war elephants against the defensive ditch, and the walls of the city. Around the city was also this ditch, sort of analogous to like a tank trap in World War II. The Roman resistance of light troops from the ditch and the walls caused the elephants to panic. Metellus then badly defeated the Carthaginians, who were already in disorder because of the panicked elephants. This is one incident in which, the elephants were not to the advantage of the Carthaginians. So the Romans captured 60 elephants and killed 11,000 Carthaginian soldiers. Rome refused Carthage's offer of peace. Here's another turn. And the Carthaginians executed their disgraced commander, Hasdrubal. In 249, Rome lost a big naval battle off the shore of Depranum, where the Carthaginian fleet was at anchor. The Romans attacked, but were completely outmaneuvered by the Carthaginians, losing 93 ships and even more ships shortly after in a storm. It took Rome 8 years to return to sea with a large battle fleet. Both sides were close to exhaustion at this point. This war sort of reminds me of World War I, which was also a very seesaw kind of struggle. And both sides fought each other to exhaustion. And you didn't know until the last couple of months who was actually going to win. So 2 years later, which I guess means 2 years, I guess it means 247, Hamilkar Barker. Yeah, I guess we've got a slide of him, right? Yes, Hamilkar Barker. He was Hannibal's father. He landed near Panormus and forced the Romans to defend the city. He then turned mostly toward guerrilla tactics. In 244, Hamilkar captured the town of Enix, hoping to use it as a base for attacking Italy. But he couldn't raise the resources. You see this exhaustion coming in. In the meantime, Carthaginian forces commanded by Hanno the Great won victories over North African tribes in Libya, a completely different conflict. But his war booty funded the war anew for Carthage. In 242, the Romans put to sea with a brand new battle fleet of 200 ships under the command of Lutatius Catullus. Seeing no Carthaginian fleet to contend with, Catullus had 9 months to rigorously train his sailors. In 241, Carthage set sail with its new battle fleet, commanded by Hanno. Sailing to rendezvous with Hamilkar's army, which you will recall is in Sicily, his ships were laden with supplies intended for an invasion of the Italian peninsula. The two fleets met in battle at the Aggregatum Islands. Hanno's 250 ships against 200 under Catullus. But the Carthaginian ships were overladen and undermanned. So they were totally outmaneuvered by the Romans. They lost 50 ships sank, 70 captured, as against 30 Roman ships destroyed. Admiral Hanno was executed for his defeat, and Hamilkar was authorized to negotiate peace terms with Rome. By the terms of the Treaty of Lactatius, named for the Roman commander, Carthage paid 2,200 talents of silver in reparations over 10 years. In terms we understand, this is equivalent to 81 long tons, a talent. Yeah, okay. So these 2,200 talents of silver is equivalent to 81 long tons, which is about 10% more than the 2,000 pound ton we're familiar with.
A long ton is 2,240 pounds, which is actually very close to a metric ton, which is 2,208 pounds.
Yeah, okay. Now, later on, I guess some Roman politicians complained that they were too lenient on the Carthaginians, and the Romans added a fee of 1,000 additional talents. But more importantly, taking control of Sicily entrenched Rome's position as a superpower in the Mediterranean and the world as a whole. It was the first time that Rome had expanded beyond Italy. The end of the war also sparked a significant but unsuccessful mutiny within the Carthaginian Empire known as the Mercenary War. 20,000 foreign mercenaries in the Carthaginian army mutinied for better pay and conditions. They were later joined by 70,000 North Africans oppressed under Carthaginian rule. Hamilkar returned from Sicily to take command of the Carthaginians and attempted to woo the rebels with leniency, but rebels tortured to death 700 Carthaginian prisoners, including a prominent Carthaginian leader. As a result, the war continued with great cruelty on both sides until the rebellion was crushed in 237. During the course of the rebellion, the Carthaginians prepared to retake the island of Sardinia, which the rebels had captured and slaughtered all Carthaginians. But Rome insisted that this would be an act of war. Instead, Rome occupied both Sardinia and Corsica, violating their recent peace treaty and laying the groundwork for the Second Punic War to begin in 218. And this is where I end.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate this was really good. Larry raised hand while I'm going to prepare my presentation, and I'm going to do a little bit more details. Larry, go ahead.
A couple of comments. We have two major sources for the Punic Wars, one of which is Livy and the other of which is Polybius. But Polybius starts out his history with some interesting claims, one of which is that the outcome of the war is surprising, and the other is that it's unprecedented. And he's probably echoing Thucydides in saying that. Okay. Basically,
You mean echoing Polybius, not Thucydides?
no, Thucydides said that the war between Athens and Sparta was unprecedented. That had never
I see.
been like that before. So he's just finished talking about why he doesn't have to talk about previous historians. But the other aspect of what he's getting at is that he wants to explain how a city such as Rome, in the space of a few years, could rise to rule the world. And so I think it's true that he's a disinterested historian, but he definitely has an axe to grind in terms of explaining why Rome did everything right, why Rome had tremendous capacity to learn, and on and on and on. So it might be just good to keep it in mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
So you're saying, you were saying that about Polybius?
Polybius begins by the question he frames is, how is it that a single city, can anyone be so indifferent or idle as not to care to know by what means and under what kind of polity almost the whole inhabited world was conquered and brought under the dominion of the single city of Rome, and that too within a period of not quite 53 years.
You know, Polybius, this figure of Polybius kind of reminds me of Josephus,
Mhm.
you know, a little later on. I mean, it's not an exact analogy, but you know, after being a commander in the Jewish rebellion, he's captured and he becomes a Roman in effect, and he writes this a very important history of what is called the Jewish Wars.
Yeah.
And one could see that he would sort of be looking over his shoulder a little about how he writes this, I suppose.
Well, another interpretation is that he was very pro-Roman. He liked the Scipios, and he spent much of his life as a hostage in the Scipio family. So he had access to the family traditions about the war as well.
You're talking about Polybius or Josephus?
Yeah, Polybius.
I have a lot to present. Sorry, I apologize. Just want to. We'll get into this a little bit. I will leave 15 minutes for discussions.
Right.
And Paul, thank you. This was, again, this was,
Thank you.
Ralph.
Ralph.
I know we have two Pauls.
Too
but-
many polls. Sorry, never too many polls. Sorry. Anyway, so as Paul Tannenbaum had alluded before, I want to talk about the city of Messina, right? That's an important catalyst between the war of Carthage and Rome. So the backstory was that basically the groups of mercenaries from Campania, which is Italy, called Mamertines, had been hired by Agathocles, who was the king of Syracuse before Hera, right, to fight his war with Carthaginians, right, and for the control of the Sicily. So there was a war between Carthaginians and Sicilians, and Agathocles was the king at the time, 315-305. So the stalemate, peace was reached between Syracuse and Carthaginians, and therefore this Mamertines felt like they were not paid, whatever. They decided to take over Messina. So this Campania mercenaries, Mamertines, they decided to take over Messina, and what they did is they killed all the male residents of the Messina and married their women and stayed with their women and took their houses, basically. So after the Agathocles dies, basically, they held the city for about 10 years, until Hera, who basically in 278 took over the control of Syracuse, became a new Greek, king, basically decides to therefore attack Mamertines, but he goes really funny about it. Initially, he instead of attacking Messina directly, he attacks the garrison cities around the Messina to show the power, basically, look, I can crash you at any point. And, and so now Mamertines themselves divide into groups. One group wants to reach out for help to Carthage, and one group wants to reach out to Rome, right? So that's what they do. So one group reached out to Rome, to Hanno, and basically, I'm sorry, no, Rome, to Carthage or Hanno. Hanno sends his ships, takes over basically the city, and another group, while talking to Rome, Rome's Senate is in decision mode. If we invade Messina right now, we're going to cause a problem with Carthage. And we kind of had a very good relationship going on since the Pyrrhus left. Why kind of ruffle the feathers. And as you know, there's, you know, two different clans, and, you know, you have, Scythian clan, you have all this Julian clan, and they didn't agree with each other. And therefore, at the end, Senate decides, let's send, kind of like for fun. I'm sorry? Somebody said something? Okay. So basically they said, let's send, kind of like for fun, just like one, legion with one consular, just to see what would happen, in general. In fact, they didn't even have ships. They kind of hired the, fishing boats, and they crossed to Messina. The Romans crossed to Messina while, the interesting fact was they crossed to Messina, and the Hanno, who was in charge of Carthage and in charge of Messina at the time, instead of Messina and Messina's garrison, and he basically told them, listen, you cannot enter those waters. His words were, per Polybius, I would not even let Romans drink the waters of Sicily. They would not come here closely. Anyway, Romans enter, he kind of slaps him on the wrist. Instead of, it was, in charge of it was Claudius, who was a consular at the time. Instead of telling him, listen, you cannot enter here, I'm gonna destroy all your ships and stuff like that, he gives them ships back, and Claudius leaves, but he is persistent. He goes back in again at night. And the weird thing is, he goes in front of Messina's consular, in front of Mamertines, and he goes, who do you rather prefer, Romans or me? Who do you want to come here? And they said, I can even call Hanno for a discussion. And they're having a discussion in the middle of the Messina square and talking about this stuff, like, who do you want to stay? And obviously Mamertines decided they want Rome. They kicked out the garrison of Carthaginians. What's interesting is now the Hanno goes back to Carthage, tell them, I lost Messina, gets crucified. That's the way they dealt with their leaders. At the time, I think Carthage had a lot of power to go in and smash Rome, won't let them in at the time. Somebody just wrote me a message. I have to go, great presentation, okay. All right. Sorry, Larry. Okay, thank you, Larry. Okay. So anyway, so now, so what's happening is Claudius Appius isn't here, but he realizes that he's kind of short of troops. He needs to go back to Senate and ask for more troops. So he asked for 40,000 troops to come into Messina, and they sent 2 legions, but no naval support, just 2 legions. Here you go. They kind of fight around Messina. Romans win. So now Carthage reaches out to Hera and goes, Hera, why don't you go with us into the war, and we will give you all these privileges, and we'll fight Romans. Now, because they're in Sicily, we don't want kind of third as an extra. And Hera goes, okay, I'm gonna go with you, against Rome. Now the problem is that Hera is not a very committed, a person, and therefore he kind of goes in, tried to fight Romans, and within like a minute or two, he escapes the field. He wants to run back to Syracuse. He's not committed to Carthage at all. He just escapes, and Romans, first they reached out to Hera, they want to fight Hera, and now they want to turn around and fight Carthaginians. And basically what happens is, then they beat out Carthaginians, and then they go after Hera in Syracuse, and as Greg had mentioned, he switches over to Rome. All right. So basically you want to settle, and he paid about like 100,000 talents, silver talents, just to settle with Romans. All right. Even though Romans needed him more than he needed them, and so because of it, Hera was able to, develop an independence or maintain independence of his kingdom Plus, whenever Romans would take over more land, he would basically, add that land, to his kingdom as well. So Romans and Hera worked together because Romans got a good deal, right? It was a perfect ally. He gave them, everything they needed, troops, supplies, food. Most importantly, he provided the Romans have a strong foothold on the island to continue their advance. All right, let's get to the Battle of Aggregatum. All right. So now we come to the Battle of Aggregatum. And what I wanted to do is, for the sake of time, and I just want to kind of go into Google Earth and see one of the Aggregatum was a small, not small, a medium-sized Greek town. So I'm gonna go to Google Earth right now and show the whatever, there was one temple of Juno, and Greek was hero, and for the Romans it was temple of Juno. They remained in Aggregato. Now the city is called Aggregato in Italy. And so I'm gonna just stop to share here. 1 second. One second, guys. Let me. I wanted to share the desktop, but it won't let me. But so what I'm gonna do is, let me reshare. All right. So what I'm going to show you is Google Earth. So we're going to go to Temple of Juno in Aggregato. 1 second. What's going on? I guess it froze on me. Okay. With people admit 1 second. What's going on? Here it is. So Google Earth basically shows you the a live feed from the Aggregato and Temple of Juno. So just show that the Greek artifacts in that city. One second, my internet is slow. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is the Temple of Juno. And kind of like, just want to show around a little bit and then play a small video. So basically, this temple was for Greeks, temple of Hera, and it's an Aggregato, and just to show you, this was a Greek town, and this is basically a live feed from that area. Thank you very much. All right. Okay. So let's talk about this temple for a second. I have a presentation on that. 1 second. And then we'll talk about the Battle of Aggregatum. All right. So everybody sees it? Okay, so what is this temple basically represented? The temple of Hera Lacinia, or Juno Lacinia, otherwise known as Temple D, is a Greek temple in the Valley del Tupli, a section of the ancient city of Aggregatum, ancient city of Acarchis, modern Aggregato in Sicily. It was built in the middle of the 5th century BC, about the year of 450 BC, in a period and style belonging to archaic Doric period. Signs of fire, which followed by the siege of Archagas of 406 BC, have been detected. And long after the temple was restored at the time of the Roman province of Sicily, with the original terracotta roof being replaced by one marble with more steeply inclined slope on the eastern side. The temple was originally dedicated to the Greek god Hera and Roman Juno. If still in the use of 4th and 5th century, it would have been closed during the persecution of the pagans in the late Roman Empire. Okay, so let's go back to the Battle of Aggregatum. So how is this city important? What's important about this city? So now we have, as you know, per map right here, and let me just bring it up this way. 1 second. All right. So now we have Carthaginians was assembling a mercenary army at Aggregatum, a Greek city in the southern coast of the Sicily, which was culturally and geographically disposed to the alliance with Carthage. So basically, it is a Carthaginian city. It was a Greek city that was in alliance with Carthage. Aggregatum was one of the largest cities in Sicily. It didn't have a port, and located several miles inland, which allowed Romans to completely surround it when they arrived. So sophistication of the Rome sea technology didn't present yet. So what they did is they basically built two, they didn't have any siege technology, so they built, they dug holes, and they were waiting basically for, they dug 2 concentric ditches outside of the city in order to prevent anyone to get in and out of the city. Okay. Now, so what happens is you have in Aggregatum, you have Carthaginian troops, and you have basically double the wall, and you have Romans waiting outside with 40,000 troops, pinning Carthaginian army down, and it was a very risky move because you could have Carthaginians like kind of come and surround them, and that's a kind of what they did. They were open to siege, and that's where the Hero comes to help. Basically, he was supplying them with food. They were kind of starving each other out at the time. So let me just get to the next slide. So what happens is, as you can see, Carthaginians kind of went behind the Roman troops, and that the contingent, reserve contingent, and while Romans were circle around inside the Aggregatum, the Carthaginian army. So what's happening is now, I think Hanno was inside the Carthaginian town. He was hungry, basically. He wasn't able to get any supplies because they're surrounded. So he decided to give him a fight. And obviously Romans, they're more disciplined. The Carthaginian army have a lot of mercenaries. They talk different language. The commanders don't talk to each other. Their leadership is horrible. So therefore, on the land, there's no match. So just to give you an example, Carthaginians had war elephants, right? So they brought about 30 war elephants to fight in this battle, right? So because they didn't trust their war elephants, they basically had a mahout, who was a driver of the elephant, have this hammer and this pike. He has to insert into elephant to kill the elephant by basically striking its spine, in case elephant went berserk and started attacking his own troops. So that's how much they didn't have any trust in their own army, so to speak. So therefore, in this case, Romans win, and they get into the city. But prior to getting into the city, Carthaginians were able to escape. But what was the most commemorative with this win? Yes, they gave Hero the deal, but Aggregatum did not really meet a Roman politeness, so to speak. And they slaughtered all the women and children inside the town. And therefore, they told everybody in Sicily, we're very ruthless and we don't care. The Romans said, basically, we will go into your city and we'll destroy you. And other towns got very, not scared, but at the same time, they wanted to repel Romans because they didn't want that kind of mercy coming toward them. They were basically very sadistic as barbarians coming to those towns. Any questions? Anybody want to add anything?
No?
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right. So we did the Temple Juno. Let's see if I have anything else there. No, okay. All right, so so I want to talk about that. Let's get to the Corvus presentation. So it's interesting that when the Romans, sorry, I'm adding to what Ralph was able to present. When Romans, and particularly Appius Claudius, was crossing the Messina, the way they were able to steal the technology from the Carthaginians, they had there was a ship that washed ashore, and therefore they were able to figure out what the quarrym was, and they basically had Roman reverse engineer this particular ships and took on 261. And Senate decided, to plunge in the world of the Navy, and try to create a fleet of initially about 120 ships and 30,000 troops, rowing them, and on the ships and stuff like that. And what Ralph had mentioned also, while they were building those ships, and in fact, initially when they were building it, Carthage were kind of looking at it and laughing at them because they were building it from the raw material, the raw wood and stuff like that. It wasn't anything prepared. So while we're preparing it, they were training their troops, like Ralph had said, with creating benches underneath. It was practice basically outside to prepare to row those ships and stuff. And who was the first one that they implemented? And we all know this family. It was Cornelius Scipio, who was initially given kind of like, so to speak, co-consular version to row those ships to fight Carthaginians. So they had created the fleet, and they gave two people, Scipio and another consular, opportunity to go to attack Rome. And so let's just go to that battle for a second. And we know this was the first Scipio, and it's not the last time we hear about Scipios. So let me just. So what happened to the Scipio is he lost the battle it was completely stupid. He was divided into, they divided the fleet into two portions. They gave 17 ships to him that were ready to go, and they gave 100 ships to another consular to attack the Carthaginians. So the Scipio took his 17 ships they literally just came off the factory, and basically went all the way to the harbor of Carthaginians at Messina, and they were just laughing at him, and they surrounded him, and they caught him. And actually the Roman Senate gave him a nickname. They call him Asena, which means an ass, which a donkey basically. And so now we fast forward, we come to this guy Delius. I don't remember if Rob mentioned him, but so what happens is this guy Delius is the one that won the war for the Romans, Cassius Delius, at the Mille, and he actually was given a triumvirate with triumph when he went to Rome, which is an important kind of step that always happens, and it rarely given to people. And he was able to use Corvus and all that stuff. We already mentioned it, so I don't want to get into that. Anybody have any questions or want to add anything? Oh, I just wanted to add a quote by this guy, Ms. Adrian Coldworthy, who wrote about Punic Wars. He's saying the Carthaginians were confused by the strange appearance of the tall Corvus near the prow of each Roman ship, but remained supremely confident of their own superiority over their inexperienced enemy. The Punic ship surged toward the enemy. Some of the Roman ships were rammed, but each dropped its corvus, whose beak speared through the deck of the enemy vessel and held them fast. In each case, the Roman marines poured across the boarding bridges and swiftly defeated the enemy crews. Okay. All right. All right. So now we come to the Battle of Aggregatum. So I just want to talk about the battle itself, right? So Battle of well, sorry. Battle of Aggregatum. Yeah. So Battle of Aggregatum, we see two different consuls that were sent: Marcus Regulus and Lucinio Bolso. Okay, and we'll hear about this guy Marcus Regulus one more time. Paul had mentioned it. I'm sorry, Ralph had mentioned it before. So what happens is in this Battle of Aggregatum, Carthaginians had 4 squadrons, right? As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just expand it a little bit. All right. 4 squadrons. In the blue is Carthaginians. In red is Romans. Okay. So now, and the Carthage sent their troops under command of Hanno and Hamilkar. I'm sorry. Yes, Hanno and Hamilkar. So Hamilkar is right here. Hanno is in this side. Okay. So now, so basically they were 4 on 4, 4 squadrons to 4 squadrons. Now what's happening is Romans, interestingly enough, put the transport of cargo, their horses and all the elements that they need to invade Africa right in the middle, right here. Okay, they were trying to invade North Africa, and they put all their transports here, and Marcus Regulus and Lucia Volso were protecting the transport on the side. So initially, what happened is the Hanno and Hamilkar thought what they're going to do is, while the 2nd and 3rd squadron would attack in the middle and kind of feint a way out to come back, and therefore be able to kind of fake it. And then on the side, 1st and the 4th squadron would hit them from the side and killing all the transport. So therefore they have nothing to invade Africa with. They said that's how the plan they thought will work. Okay. So Carthaginians attempt flanking maneuvering with 1st and the 4th squadron. They use 2nd and the 3rd squadron to lure away the lead Roman formation. Okay. So let's go back. So, whoops. Now, this is actual battle, right? This is not what happened. So now you have this 2nd and 3rd squadron inserting themselves in a second and 3rd area, but what they didn't expect is to lose that battle in the middle, because what happened, Romans were able to win that battle, and now that whole plan, it kind of like went away. So Romans, what they did is they turned over and started helping their transport, while the Carthaginians 1st and the 4th squadron were not able to defeat the transport because the Roman fleet was able to turn over and come back and help out. And this is how it would have looked. This is how it looks. Now, you see Romans turn over, lead Roman turn around and attack the remaining Carthaginians on their rear flank. And it was a total Roman victory. So they basically surrounded 1st and the 4th squadron, while 2nd and 3rd was defeated initially. So therefore, now what happens is, and we'll, obviously, now we're talking about this guy Regulus, and let's talk about him right now. So in this case, there was about 40,000 casualties from Carthaginians. They sunk over, I believe, 30 ships, and they took 70 ships, as prisoners inside. So there was an interesting, battle where Romans won. And so let's just go back to the invasion of Africa. All right. So now Regulus and Wislu, both consuls, now sail into the city Apsus where they basically, were able to settle, foothold, and they were able to, to win a beachhead and took over the, city of Apsis. But Regulus had about 15,000 troops and 500 cavalry, which was not enough. And he sent Wislu back with all the possessions and everything that he took over, all the ships and everything he took over from Carthage, send them back to show them, this is what we have. I mean, here we go. There's the spoils of the war. So what's happened is Regulus, he was very kind of like cavalier type of attitude. He was on his own, basically. So he decides to go further, and he decided to go to city of Attis, and he defeats Carthage in city of Attis on the land. Only 500 cavalry as a 15,000, what is it called? 15,000 troops. And so this is how he looked, this guy Regulus. So he was in charge of that campaign to land in North Africa. And therefore, so here comes now the Xenopus. Xenopus was a hired help from Sparta that basically and this is how he looks, they work for Carthage, right? So what he did is basically, he came to Carthage and he needed to evaluate the troops. And he looked at the troops and he goes, oh my God, you have an amazing cavalry here. And then he looks at their land troops. You have Balearic, slingers, you have Numidian cavalry, you have all this amazing Lydian, and then they're all staying in phalanx. And it's amazing, troop combination. You have warrior, elephants. And he says, the problem is not with soldiers, you guys losing battle. The problem is with your leadership. What are you guys doing? So now we come to the battle. So you basically, the word got to the Senate of the Carthage, and they said, let me hire you, Xenopus, to fight Carthaginians, to fight Romans, or this guy Regulus, who is literally on kind of like one-man campaign against the Carthage. So, basically, he said, you know what, I think if I get rid of your leadership, I'm going to be able to help you out. Xenopus was helping Spartan's general, or Spartan mercenary was helping Carthage. So this is the battle itself. All right. So what happened is this. So this battle happened in Tunis, and then so Regulus sees that Carthaginians were able to assemble the army, and he goes, okay, I just defeated you twice already in North Africa. He has a cavalier attitude. I'm going in. Screw it. I only have 500 cavalry. I don't care. And then in fact, his words were, I'm gonna feast in Carthage tonight. And that was his words, okay? So now, he basically was very cavalier. He tells his generals, I'm gonna be in Carthage tonight. So Xenopus, what he does first is interesting enough. He basically, this is the way he builds it. He has cavalry at the flanks. You have elite mercenary and elephants in the front, right? And Romans with regulars, he just doesn't care. He just puts cavalry. So 500 cavalry with 250 on each side. He's probably 10-1 outnumbering Carthaginian cavalry, 10-1 outnumbering the Regulus army. I don't understand how did he not think that he's not going to lose this battle? So anyway, Xenopus, being as wise as he is, surveys Regulus forces and realizes while Carthage were on even par with Roman infantry, Carthaginians had 10-1 advantage when it came to their cavalry. Xenopus chooses wide open field to be inside of confrontation. So in Apis and Attis, all these other cities, the stupid Carthaginians didn't think, why did they have their elephants on a hilltop? It kind of like limited their efficiency as far as moving their cavalry. So this guy, Xenopus, the first thing that we got to have in a wide field. This is what's going to help us. We have elephants, we got to have them, the range of movement. And elephants was put at the head of the army and cavalry at the wings. Regular responded by deepening its lines. So elephants can't break through them. completely. But in order to do so, he had to sacrifice the width of his front. He made it so that short end rather than the broad side are facing Carthaginians. With shortened front, Regulus' army will be easily outflanked by the Carthaginian cavalry. Xenopus sent elephants, which caused, patented havoc right away, right? Romans didn't know what to do with them. He gets the various contingent of multilingual work to work together. That's another advantage he has. He wants all these Libyans, Balearic, Numidians work together. Before, Carthaginians weren't able to do it. What is Carthage? They were the slave owners, right? They were asking for almost 50% dowry, or taxes from all of their, colonies and stuff. They were extremely, at least with Romans, if you remember, Caesar offered, Gallic, cream of the crop, Senate abilities. Here, there's no offer. They're like, this is slave mercenaries, basically. So in this case, is while Romans were focused on this elephants, he ordered out the cavalry, which routed Roman counterparts easily. Only 2,000 out of 15 Romans were able to escape. Regulus was taken a prisoner, so he was right. He would feast tonight in Carthage, so he was right. That's exactly where he feasted, but he was obviously in a dungeon. Now you have Romans sending about 200 ships to rescue those 2,000 people that escaped. If you look at the map, and what happened is nobody told them because they're new at seafaring, and you're not supposed to go at this time. There was storms everywhere, and it was about 100. All those 200 ships, most of them were broken in the storms, and it was 100,000 people almost. The whole Roman fleet was basically dissipated. I'm sorry, I haven't asked any questions. Anybody has any questions or wanted to add anything?
We will interrupt you, don't worry.
All right, let's keep going to the battles. Sorry, I'm going to be mostly moving to battles. There's a lot of battles going on here, guys. So now, we have all this stuff. We come to Hamilkar Barker, right? As it was mentioned by Ralph, that he was sent by Carthage to Sicily to basically restore the order for Carthage, right? Now he comes in, but Carthage says, we don't have any money. So you have to go in and kind of do your own thing. So basically, a typical of Carthaginians, he was excellent at warfare, right? He was an amazing at warfare. He was trying to fix the situation in Sicily, but there was.
Sorry, what did you say? Atypical or typical? Atypical. Carthaginians. One word. Okay. Yep.
They were the traders. They were seafarers. They didn't.
All the difference in the world. All right. Thanks.
So he was a war clan. Hamilkar Barker was a warrior. So now he basically goes in, and for 7 years he's able to hold basically almost by himself Roman base. He takes an enemy lines at Mount Arcte. You do multiple raids at the land, at the sea, and at some point he basically almost single-handedly attempted to lift the siege of Drepana, and we'll talk about Drepana. Almost captures Roman strongholds. I mean, he causes so much problems to Romans, they don't know what to do with him. So Roman had enough. So what they do is they hire this counselor, and his name is, I hopefully won't butcher it, Caius Latius Catulus. And what happens is they're saying, we need a fleet, okay? But the issue is that, we need to really fight this guy off. And so what happens is Catulus, gets this fleet, and this is what happened. So Catulus made a blockade of Lilybaeum, and Drepana. So let's look at those cities right now. Sorry. Yeah. So you can see Drepana and the city of Lilybaeum would have been close here. All right. And city of Lilybaeum. So he basically blockades two cities, Roman general. And then he does it at night, which really restricts. I mean, Carthage doesn't really operate at night. They operate at the daytime because that's how they always been. So basically, Catullus now waits for Carthage to send reinforcements from North Africa. He's so well versed in seafaring, he's able to read the wind, where they're going to be coming in through. Okay, so he's able to see where they're coming in, where the Carthaginians coming in through. So what he did is he made his ships lighter by cutting the rigging of his ships. Roman ships were faster, more maneuverable. Roman were able to ram their opponents because of that fact. And Carthage came in with all this cargo to resupply city Drepana. It was actually in blockade, and Lilybaeum. So therefore, he was able to win. Now Carthage is suing for peace because of it. Now, what are the terms of the peace? All right. So what are the terms? The Carthaginian armies were allowed to evacuate the island with their weapons and armor, which was very good of Romans to do. Sicily was now Rome's possession. Neither side could make war on each allies. Roman prisoners were to be released. Carthage had to pay indemnity in 20 years. Then they came back and said, nope, we're going to increase the indemnity and decrease the number of years. So screw you. This is how much you're going to have to pay. And Carthage was to lose bordering islands, right? So I know that Ralph had spoke about the earlier offer by Regulus to Carthaginians when he prior to lost war. He almost would have ended the First Punic War, but his terms were crazy. He basically wanted his own triumph in Rome. And he was telling him, you only can have one warship. Here they're offering, they're more humane. I mean, they're draconic, but they're not, unreasonable type of things. So basically, Carthage was down, but not out. It was actually harsh terms. Hamilkar resentment. We know what happened in Versailles. In this case, I think I could kind of like relate it to Versailles, where Germans were upset of their deal at Versailles. And therefore, now, we're going to come to Punic too. But I want to talk about other things as well. What I want to do is, I want to go into the Nora site on Google Earth, where the Phoenicians initially had a port. I just wanted to show you that, kind of get a feeling of that. Anybody have any questions or want to add anything?
No, we're fine.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Is everybody still here? I can yield my presentation out.
Yes, we are here.
All right. So
Yes, we're here.
I'm sorry. This is the city of Cagliari. Okay. This is on. What do you see? This is live feed from the Google Earth. What do you see outside? This is a port, right? Initially, their port, the Carthaginian port, was they needed to be close to the water, obviously. But Rome obviously took over this city, which is now called Nora. And as you can see, Rome had built the bath. This is a laying of the tiles from the Roman bath. All right. There's other things also. I just want to show you the pictures that Romans overlaid the Phoenician town. So this initially was a Phoenician town. So this is the columns from the Rome, and then there's an amphitheater. This is a Roman bath tiles, but all these other ruins are Phoenician ruins. And because they're close to the water, that's where the Carthaginians wanted to, basically have their, outpost, a colony in Sicily. Just kind of like I wanted to show you. And I'm going to play a small video on that, to that effect. Stay with me. All right. One second. Oh. All right.
Question.
Yes.
Maybe you mentioned this, but what is the significance of this site for?
Nora, it was the Phoenician outpost prior to Punic War. Romans took it over from the, I just wanted to show you because there's no survival of the port that was left in Tunis, the Carthage. And this one served as a port.
Well, wait a minute. So this is in North Africa?
No, this is in Sicily. But they have
Sardinia.
Sardinia. This is
This is the
Cagliari.
southernmost point of Sardinia. It
Yeah.
is the closest point between Sardinia and Sicily. It is the strategic entry to Sardinia from the south.
Yeah, actually, like you see, the Carthage was destroyed. So if you go to Carthage right now, it's mostly Roman ruins there. You know, here there are some Carthaginian remains. And by the way, another what's famous about Nora, that they found a stone there with inscription of Phoenician inscriptions. That actually this stone kind of confirmed the historicity of Dido's brother. What's his name? How you call it? You know, the Bernard show. There was a Bernard show about My Fair Lady. How you call this? The other name for it? Oh my God.
Pygmalion?
Yes, Pygmalion. Yeah. So even though the show is about another Pygmalion, but Pygmalion was the king of Tyre at the time, and they found this stone. It's called Nora stone. It's very famous if you look it up. And it basically, the inscription said that it was established, the city was established, captured and established at the time of King Pygmalion. And by that, they kind of established historicity of Dido as well, and foundation of Carthage. And it was the 9th century BC.
Right. Thank you so much. So now I just want to talk a little bit about a funny part of, I mean, there was obviously no funny part of this war, but there was this guy named Publius Claudius Pulcher, and you can see him on the left. And so the Romans believed in auspices. Remember, I did the religion in Rome, and there was ogres that would develop auspices for people to go in. So they believed in auspices of the holy chickens, right? So this guy, Pulcher, was one of the counselors that were hired to defeat, while the Barca was in the Sicily, to defeat Barca, and they sent them out to defeat Barca and stuff like that in the war. And and first he went in the fleet, and before going with his fleet to the city of Drepana, what he needed to do is he collected chickens, they call holy chickens, and if you feed those chickens and they eat, that means that you have an auspice to go in and basically wage the war. If the chickens don't eat, you can't go. So now he takes the chickens, he gives them holy food, whatever it is, and they don't eat. And he goes in Latin, bibem conium esse nolent, which means if they don't want to eat, maybe they can drink. And he throws all those chickens overboard. And therefore, they say that Aspis, he lost the war because of the fact that the chickens were thrown over the board. They didn't even let them, he didn't listen to chickens. They didn't want to eat. They didn't need to wage the war, basically. And that's just one of the funny things. Also, what I want to talk about is armies, right? Contrast of the armies. So I would remember I was talking about the port on the left. This is the Carthaginian port. This is Colosseum. I just kind of like wanted to point it out. So different armies, all right? So, and, Ralph had mentioned some of it, but let's just talk about it. So what does the Carthaginian, army had looked like, or had something? So on the left right here, we're talking about a sacred band. Who are they? You can see they have the white shields. That's a commander of the Carthaginian army in the field. They call him Rab Mahanet. They were selected for duration of the specific war. I'm sorry, the commander of the army from Senate, it was like a counselor, so to speak, were selected. They call him Rab Mahanet from Carthage. Basically, magistrate would select them just like counselor in Carthage. And they were the ones who waged the war. The ones on the white shield are actually not the ones. No, those to Mahanet had to be responsible to Safets, which is magistrate, for which important decisions as when to hold the truth, sue for peace, or withdraw. In addition, after the battle or war, the commanders would be subject to a tribunal, which investigated their competence or otherwise. So Hanno got crucified because he led people in Messina. That was one of the things that happened. Different family groups, which Carthage had their own private armies, which could then be employed for the state. Let's say Hanno, that's one family. Then you had Hamilkar Barker family. So they had their own armies. The Carthaginian army was composed of citizen hoplites. So this one on the left is a citizen hoplite. They actually called the citizen hoplites and African mercenaries a sacred band. There was only about 2,500 of them, 3,000 of them in total, okay? Then you have a second source of the troops, which is right here. They're mostly from the conquered territory of North Africa, especially Libya and Tunis. Then you have Numidian cavalry. So what's interesting about Numidian cavalry, and Numidian cavalry is on, is right here on the bottom, is Numidian cavalry whose riders armed themselves with a javelin and rode without a bridle. Such was their skill in controlling their mount. They actually could ride 2 horses at a time, as was also alluded as well. They carried a small shield for protection and also threw long poisoned darts at the enemy. An unusual contingent of mercenaries came from Libyan, Egyptian lands, which fielded women in battle as well. So there was a Libyan, Egyptian lands, there was women that were battle. And then, and not to forget the last but not least, the Balearic slingers, as well. So that's an interesting one. That's basically all my presentation, guys.
Yeah,
and then maybe the last thing I can do is earlier I showed the Temple of Juno. I want to play a small video on Temple of Juno quickly. and then we'll open for questions. 1 second. It's literally a couple of minutes.
But is it Greek or a Roman temple?
This is Greek temple, Greek temple, Greek temple.
Then it's Temple of Hera, right?
Well, it's Temple of Hera, but it's not in Sicily. This is a replica that was in Spain. Let me just stop share. And I just wanted to show how it's been constructed. It's an important fact. I mean, I read the. Okay.
Yeah, actually, yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there. I've seen this temple. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, Temple of Hera. You're right. This is how it would have looked, the one I showed earlier, from the Aggregatum. You get the point, I guess.
So this is the animated reconstruction of a Greek temple. Is that the idea?
That's right.
And the relevance to our
Aggregatum was a Greek town. I wanted to show that what was an Aggregatum as a Greek, but it was allied with Phoenicians.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, sometimes some of it doesn't have reference, but it's cool to show.
All right. Thank you. I wanted to compliment something Howard said last week, before our aborted meeting, our last attempt at this, our previous attempt at this. So Howard said, in speaking about the Roman propensity for conquest, that they sort of didn't have an off switch. Maybe I'm sort of paraphrasing, but you kind of like, the Romans kind of just had this.
Yeah, I was quoting John Keegan's book on, there's a book by John Keegan. Hang on a second.
John Keegan, yeah, the military historian.
Yep.